Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Thank you for joining me again for the Spirit of Liberty. First time we've done one of these in a few weeks. Last week, we did a live stream in the evening with Pastor Wampler that was really good. If you've not seen that one, make sure you go and check that out. Week before that, I was out of town, wasn't able to do one, so it's been a few weeks since we've done one in the afternoon. But something I do want to make everyone aware of is in the future, we might not always do these in the afternoon. I'm in the process of lining up some live streams with other pastors, and I'm probably going to do most of those in the evening. Those are going to involve just IFB type subjects, talking about just stuff in the IFB, whatever. Apparently, my volume's a little low. Let me know if that's better. And we're going to talk about subjects like that. I've got one scheduled for next Tuesday. Next Tuesday afternoon, we will not have a live stream in the morning. It will be in the evening at 6 p.m. And I'm going to be joined by Pastor Dallas Payton. And we're going to be talking about the big repentance battle of the 90s and just kind of some of what we're still seeing today as a result of that battle. And I had a very interesting conversation with him several months ago, and I decided I wanted to kind of have a public conversation with him about that. So I'm really excited about that conversation. I don't want to get into that too much now. I will share most of those details with you next week, so be watching for that one, and I guarantee you're going to enjoy that conversation. But whenever I can't get them lined up with pastors, I'll probably just do them in the afternoon. So just make sure you hit the notification bell, and that'll help you know for sure when it's going to happen. I probably won't always do announcements, but we'll see what happens there. But today, we're going to go ahead and get into today's topic, and that is about how married men should treat other women. Now, I'm just going to tell you, the rules change a little bit when you get married. And there are certain types of interaction between male and female that when you're single, is appropriate. It's one thing if you're flirting a little bit, trying to impress some girl, trying to get her attention and things like that. But, after you get married, that's over. I mean, you are done with that kind of thing. And so a lot of the specifics we're going to get into, this is geared towards married men because, again, the rules definitely change after you get married. And it's very important that you get a hold of these things. We are having way too many problems today with adultery and even just, what people will call emotional affairs and things like that. And I know of pastors who have fallen because of adultery. I've known pastors too that have even fallen because of emotional affairs where nothing physical took place, but there was definitely inappropriate relationship going on between him and another woman. And these things are not okay. They are not acceptable in any way. And we need to guard ourselves from these things. Very important that we do that. Same thing for ladies too. And so, these things are very important. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to, share some rules. Some of these things are very general, but then we're going to talk a little bit about the specifics and just how to apply these things. And hopefully this can be a help and a blessing. And hopefully you'll do these type of things in your life because, again, when you fall in these areas, the consequences are devastating. And men way too often, because they are way too obsessed with themselves, only thinking about themselves, they do things that just have devastating consequences on their wife, on their children. So many people get hurt when you sin in these areas, and you've got to do whatever you have to protect yourself because temptation is a real thing, and we are all susceptible to temptation. And it's a very foolish thing to think that you would never do anything like that. That's where you can really get yourself in trouble. So first thing I want to talk about when it comes to rules, you could say, is just men, if you're married, keep your hands off other women. Just Keep your hands off them. We all know 1 Corinthians 7:1 says, now concerning the things whereof ye wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. And understand, every man has certain things that they need from a woman. There is that desire to touch. There is that desire to be touched. There is that desire that is completely 100% normal for a man to have. But God has designed that all be fulfilled through your wife, no one else. And so even single guys, if you have that desire, you need to seek for it to be fulfilled in a wife. You need to find a wife. After you get married, then, by all means, let those needs be fulfilled. And then after you get married, you make sure those needs are only fulfilled by your wife. And you say, well, I still need something else. Well, then you are messed up, and you are being tempted to sin. And we all get tempted to sin. We all might get tempted to covet something that belongs to someone else. We all might get tempted to steal something, but it's not okay for you to steal. Everyone gets tempted to steal and maybe take something that's not theirs. Just because you have that temptation or that desire does not make it right. You know what you do? You control that desire, and you do not take what does not belong to you. And so if you feel like you have some desire for someone that is not your wife, then you just need to get over it. And you do not even attempt to fulfill that desire. We live in a perverted world today that thinks that just because someone desires something, that it's just their sexual orientation and that's okay. No, that there's some things that are not okay. And we are supposed to keep certain appetites and things within the bonds of marriage. And let me tell you, people who are just doing what they want to do, they're never satisfied. They're never happy. They never find fulfillment. That's why we have so many perverts today. That's why we have so many LGBTs and all those freaks out there, is because there are people who have rejected all of God's rules and decided they are just going to give themselves over to the things of the flesh, and God ends up giving them over to a reprobate mind. And then no matter what they do, no matter how weird, crazy, sick, twisted, these people never find satisfaction. So you just got to make sure that you understand, I have desires. I have to keep them within the limits that God placed. And when it comes to touching, let it only be your wife. And so every man needs certain things from a woman, whether it be sexual, whether it even be emotional, but have those things come from your wife. Some guys, maybe it's not even the sexual, maybe it is. They just, they like, talking to women. They want that emotional connection. Use your wife for that, not someone else. When it comes to touching, it can be difficult to draw biblical lines on what is sinful and what isn't. But I think it's safe to say there are things that are cultural when it comes to touching and how we interact. So for example, the Bible says not to touch a woman, therefore, men shouldn't even shake a woman's hand. Okay. And, obviously, I don't think, anybody would really think it's inappropriate for a man to shake a woman's hand. And then you could say, well, what about hugging? Okay. Is it always a sin for a man to hug a woman that isn't his wife? I won't even go as far as to say that that's always a sin, but I will say this: if you just have this desperate need to hug a woman, have that need fulfilled with your wife. And when you have somebody that comes along, I don't see anything in the Bible against men hugging women, and they're just pushing for their right to just go hug women whenever they want, I think there's something wrong with you. Some things are cultural, and we should never do anything. Men, you should never do anything that would make a woman feel violated or uncomfortable. And in America today, I don't think there's any women that feel violated or uncomfortable when you shake their hand. And you don't have the right to do that. I believe that's one of the ways we as men are supposed to show respect for women is by not doing things that are going to creep them out and make them feel violated. And so, now, again, if some woman's like, hey, I'm not comfortable with you shaking my hand, then I'm not going to shake her hand. I'm not even going to try to shake her hand. And, in America today, there's probably some cultures where, hugging is way more common and normal, but there's some people, they're more standoffish. You're going to kind of violate their space, and you shouldn't do that. We shouldn't be going and violating people's space. And I'm worried about the person that just really feels like they have a right to go around hugging women. Listen, if you want to hug women that bad, go get a wife and go hug her all you want. But if any woman feels uncomfortable with that kind of thing, don't do it. There's some cultures where it's normal and common, in situations where it's normal or common, where maybe a guy, and it's considered gentlemanly, to take a woman's hand and kiss her hand. But in America today, you're probably going to creep a lot of women out if you do that. So you know what? You shouldn't do that. I'm pretty sure I'd creep the women in our church out if when they came to church, I greeted them and I kissed their hand. And so because that's going to creep them out, I shouldn't do it. If I really need to kiss a hand, I've got a wife. Okay? And so, again, there are things where touching can happen that's not sinful, it's not sensual, where it is appropriate, but we need to know where those lines are. We need to not cross those lines. And so the rule of thumb, don't do anything that's going to make another woman uncomfortable. Don't do anything that's going to look bad and could cause questions. And, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we do want to abstain from appearance of evil. So I don't think somebody's violating the Bible when they, shake a woman's hand. I think it's very clear in 1 Corinthians 7 when he's talking about not touching a woman. It's, in referring to in a sexual manner. And so, but again, some people are just creepy, and we don't want to creep people out. And so we want to make sure we avoid temptation. And that's why, he said, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife. And temptation, it can cause unpredictable outcomes, and we should do everything we can to avoid temptation. 2 Timothy 2:22 says, flee also youthful lusts, but follow righteousness, faith, charity, peace with them that call on the Lord out of a pure heart. We don't want to put ourselves in tempting situations. That's why it's a good rule for you to just have to not be alone with other women. Say, what if something happens and I find myself alone? Well, again, you haven't sinned, but you ought to, try to avoid those situations. If you're in a situation that kind of looks bad, you ought to try to get out of that situation. There was a situation here about a year or so ago where I was at the church and I heard somebody come in, and I went out, and it was a young lady, and she started acting really crazy and weird. I won't go into the details of the whole situation, but she came, she was very emotionally distraught. She was going through a hard time. And it was just a situation where I was like, this could look really bad. And she was just kind of acting crazy. And so I just like, hey, can we go talk outside? And, and so we did. We went and we stood in the front of the building outside. And, why did I do that? Because, again, I don't know what's going on. I didn't want to just run her off, but I also didn't want to be in a situation that even looked bad. I didn't want to be in a situation where I could get accused of something. So I said, let's go outside. And we did. And we talked outside where people are driving by, people can be walking by. In fact, while we were outside talking to, somebody actually came by to see me that's from the church, one of the men. And so, I'm glad, he showed up and was able to see everything was on the up and up, but it would have looked weird if we were in a room alone somewhere. And then, he comes in, sees me talking to her. It's just a bad testimony. So we ought to try to avoid things like that. I wasn't tempted to do anything, but I make an effort to try to keep myself out of situations like that. I don't go around giving women rides in my car by myself. It doesn't mean that I would never do it. What if there's a woman stranded on the road, side in a ditch, during a blizzard? Do you just leave her there? I mean, I don't think it's wrong for a guy to pick her up and take her somewhere. You haven't sinned in that situation, but it's just about using wisdom. It's about avoiding compromising situations. And I don't need to be driving women around that I'm not married to. If I really need a car ride with a woman, I have a wife that I can do that with. And if you give a woman a ride in your car and you guys don't touch each other, did you sin? No, you probably didn't. But why are you fighting for that right? Why do you have, that need to do that so much? Just get a wife. And so I don't want to put myself in tempting situations. Job 31:1, he said, I have made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? There's just some things we don't even need to entertain. We don't need to think about. Proverbs 7:5 says that they may, talking about wisdom, that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words. And, guys, we, you have that need, you want to be desirable, you want all that, some people to think you're great. And there are women out there that are good at giving a guy what he wants when it comes to attention and when it comes to things like that. But a lot of times they're doing it to seduce. And we're not going to go through Proverbs chapter 7, but this young man that was void of understanding, man, he took the bait, hook, line, and sinker, and he destroyed his life. And men are very likely to do that. And, we need to avoid those things. And so, you don't need to be, listening or taking these compliments from other women that aren't your wife. You don't need to be worried about impressing women that are not your wife. You want to impress a woman. I understand the need to impress a woman. That's why I have a wife. I understand all these needs. Okay. I am 100% red-blooded male myself. But again, that's why I have a wife. And I shouldn't be trying to get any of those needs met by anyone that I'm not married to. So again, a lot of these things we're talking about when it comes to touching, okay? Again, is it always inappropriate to hug and all that kind of thing? Again, I'm just saying there's a situation where you might need to, I mean, obviously we don't need to go so extreme in not touching a woman that if a woman falls down, you can't help her up, that, you can't catch her or something like that. But if you just have this, if you're just fighting for this right to have this physical contact, it's obvious, there is a need that you're wanting to be met, but that specific need that you have, God wants you to have that met through a wife. So I make it my goal and my effort to just, not avoid touching women. It doesn't mean I don't do things that are culturally acceptable, that don't creep women out, when it comes to things like shaking hands and stuff like that. But again, I wouldn't do it. If a woman didn't want me shaking her hand, I'm not bothered by that. I don't need to shake her hand. So, but I also don't want to insult people either, and I don't want to, reject them or do something that you said could be perceived as insulting like that, because I'm just like super over the top with that. I think that's ridiculous. So either way, just good rule of thumb, just keep your hands off other women. Another thing too, and this is something we see in the Bible, treat women, especially in the church, in your church, like mothers and sisters. It says in 1 Timothy 5:1, rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, and the younger men as brethren. Explaining how to treat older men and younger men, and the elder women as mothers, the younger as sisters, with all purity. And I think this is a great mindset that every man should have when it comes to the women in their church. And I'm not trying to talk about myself, but this is my attitude, with women that go to our church, that I think of them as mothers or sisters, the older as mothers, the younger as sisters. And and because of that, just like a guy would never do anything, you know, perverted when it comes to his mother or sisters, we should never have any desire to do that with women in the church. If we love them like we're supposed to, if we care about them like we're supposed to, that's the kind of love and care we're going to have. The kind like we do for a mother or for a sister. And understand too, when it comes to my sisters, I hug my sisters. I don't think anybody in the world thinks there's something wrong with a guy hugging his sisters. But, here's why it's appropriate to hug your sister, to hug your mom, because, unless you're some weird psycho pervert, you're never going to think anything lustful. You're not going to do it for any creepy reason. Okay. That just doesn't happen with your mother and with your sisters. It is, that is an embrace with full purity. And it's easy to do that kind of thing. Okay. I'm not capable of having that kind of, weird feeling towards my actual mother sisters. Now, women in the church, that is possible. And there's a lot of pastors out there that have committed adultery with women in the church. And I think I can't imagine that, because, while I understand temptation and lust and things like that, when it comes to the people that you go to church with, the people that you've been pastoring and ministering to, I think of them like family. That's how I think of them. But there is a capability, because they're not, flesh and blood, to have that temptation. So I'm still not going to do that with them. I'm not going to go hugging on the women in the church. I don't believe it gives me the right. But I believe that when he's talking about treating them as mothers and sisters with all purity, just like brothers naturally want to protect their sisters, we should be protective of the women in our church. And think about too, it is a very natural thing to be protective over your sisters. Remember the Jacob's sons when Dinah was defiled? Remember how fighting mad they got? And they literally took their anger too far. But it made them fighting mad when someone defiled their sister. We see even Absalom, who was a pretty wicked man. Remember how angry he got when his brother, raped his sister Tamar? He ended up killing his brother. And why did he do that? We know that Absalom was kind of a pervy guy himself when we see what he did with his father's concubines and that story. And that's a pretty messed up story. The sons of Jacob, they had some pretty big problems too. They got super mad about Shechem treating their sister like a harlot, but Judah didn't have any problem, going and seeing a harlot. So either way, it's natural for a guy to struggle with lust, but it's also natural for a guy to really care and be protective of his sisters. And I believe that's the way we should be towards women in the church, is we would never do anything to violate them, and nor would we want anyone to do anything to violate them. I think it's good to be protective that way. And so just like, we want people to respect our sisters and not treat them wrong, that's exactly how we should feel about our sisters in Christ. And I think if we have that, if you have that mindset, like Paul said, then you're not even going to think about doing that kind of thing. So just a very good rule of thumb, treat the older women as mothers and the younger as sisters. And so another thing too, make sure you avoid close relationships and emotional connections with other women. Okay? This is very important. Okay? I understand the need for an emotional relationship, communication with a woman. That's what your wife is for. Once you get married, you never seek for fulfillment for that type of thing in any other woman. And this is something too where you got to be really careful, because we live in a day and age where many occupations have women in the workforce, and you can find yourself in compromising situations, a lot of times depending on what your job is, you got to watch out for that. You got to protect yourself. I understand in this age of feminism that, if you're a Christian man, you're not going to be able to demand no women work with you and things like that. You'd probably get fired for being a sexist or something like that. But you can protect yourself. And I don't believe jobs have a right to put you in, really compromising situations. And so you just got to make sure you prepare yourself. And, I'm not going to go in all the possible scenarios there are, but, here's just a few things that all of us need to do, just kind of habits we need to get into, rules of thumb. But when it comes to communicating with women, okay, obviously, I don't think it's a sin for a man to talk to a woman. Sometimes I'll have a conversation with one of the ladies at the church. But when it comes to communicating with other women, just all communication should be public and in the open. Okay? And so on a typical Sunday, I might strike up a conversation with one of the women at the church. We might be talking about, their kids or whatever, but those conversations are typically in very public places where literally anybody can walk by and hear. If I've got to go off into a corner somewhere, if I've got to go off privately somewhere to have that conversation, that's not a good thing. Okay? If there is something I need to privately discuss with a woman, I should have accountability. I should have my wife present. I should have their husband present or something like that. But I don't think, guys should just ignore women, not talk with women, but just make sure when you do have those conversations, it's public. Because when things are public, you just naturally, keep things within certain boundaries. It's because people are watching. Everybody's seeing it. So you're not even going to think about and even be tempted to do certain things, talk about stuff that's inappropriate. So keep all communication public and in the open. If there is that need to deal with something deep, personal, emotional, have accountability. This is where a lot of pastors get in trouble because often, you have women in the church who do have, some kind of needs. Maybe it's a single woman. Maybe it's somebody who's been divorced. Maybe there's reasons that women often need counsel. And this is why most pastors, and I think all pastors should do this, if they counsel women, they don't do it alone. And, that's a rule I have. I've counseled women in our church. I've counseled women in my office, but when I do, my wife's here, or her husband is there. And I don't need to do that. I will, I've taken phone calls from women before, but at the same time too, I think even communication like that, you need to have, your wife there, or, on the other line, present in the room or something like that. But again, where are the lines on this thing? It's just all about protecting yourself. For example, too, I've had women call the church phone, and sometimes people call, they'll ask a question, and, I'm not just going to be like, I'm sorry, you're a woman. My wife's not present. I can't talk to you. I can let them ask questions. I can let them, tell me what's on their mind, and then I can judge the situation. And if it's something that's really personal or something, then, I'll make that choice about whether, getting that accountability and things like that. It's really hard to get tempted if a woman calls the church about a Bible question, about service times, something like that. There's all kinds of legitimate reasons to call a church and for me to talk to a woman. But once it starts getting personal, and if it starts, and if it's something that needs to be frequent, by all means, before there can be any chance of having some kind of emotional connection, you need to bring somebody in. And so it's all about just protecting yourself. It's all about having those boundaries. When it comes to communicating online, and social media, again, keep that kind of thing public. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm going to probably cover that in the next point. But another thing too, when it comes to this type of thing, when it comes to having conversations with women. Because, again, if, I might start creeping somebody out, and you don't want to, again, guys, we shouldn't creep out women. And if you're just always talking to this one woman, you might start creeping them out. And we don't want to do that. Or if there's a woman that's always wanting to talk to you as a guy and you're married, guys can be really clueless about certain things. But you know what? This is an area too where, trust your wife's instincts. If another woman seems like she's getting too close, trust your wife's instincts on that. The Bible does say in 1 Corinthians 7:4, the wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband. Likewise, also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Did you know that your wife, while you are in authority, husbands, your wife has the right to demand and expect that you live up to your vows? She has every right to demand and expect that of you. And if she sees something that's creeping her out, if she thinks you're getting too close, or that woman's getting too close, if she's thinking that she's flirting or something like that, you need to pay attention to that. You might not think that she's doing that, but your wife picks up on that, and it is, and it's an insult to her. It's a diss on her. Guys, we understand, guy flirts with your wife, especially when you're around. That's kind of a diss on you. And you know what? We don't want her letting a guy doing that and accepting that. You would want your wife to shut the guy down. And if there's some woman flirting with you, you know what? You need to shut that down. Don't eat it up. Again, what guy doesn't want to think he's irresistible and the next Elvis Presley or something like that? Obviously the pride in us might like that, but we have no right to accept that kind of thing because we're married. We are Christian men. And so trust your wife's instincts. If she tells you, stop talking to that woman, stop talking to that woman. Okay? And you know what? Go ahead and get offended and tell somebody that, I'm talking about feminist stuff, and let them, take my words and twist them, make mean whatever they want. But I'm telling you, guys, you ought to do that. And you ought to listen to your wife in that area. And ladies, listen to your husband in that area too. Your husband knows how guys think. And if there is some guy that's just paying a little too much attention to you, you might not notice it, but he does, and you better listen to what he has to say in that area. So if you need a close friend for emotional reasons, you have a wife. And, and if you do need, and I'm not saying, guys, you can have other close friends. You can have other connections with people, but it needs to be men, not women. David, we see in 2 Samuel 1:26 says, I am distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant hast thou been unto me. Thy love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. Now, there's perverts out there that try to make that some kind of sexual thing, but understand that, David probably didn't have the best emotional relationships with wives because he had several of them. That's really going to affect your connection. And the fact that David said this here is just one more proof that it was never a good thing to have multiple wives. God was never for that. But David did have a very close love and bond with Jonathan, and there wasn't anything inappropriate about that. And it exceeded the love he had for women because he had bad relationships with women. And so, guys, if you just need somebody to connect with, somebody to hang out with, somebody to go golfing with, let it be a guy, not a woman. And I have certain hobbies and things that I like doing that, I'd probably rather do, most of I'd rather do it with my wife. But if my wife just hates it, if I'd like to go fishing with my wife, but if my wife just hates fishing, there's nothing wrong with me, and I just need to go fishing with somebody, I can go fishing with other guys. You know what I don't get to do? Go fishing with another woman. It's okay with guys, not okay with other women. If I have something, and in, most stuff I do, I prefer to do with my wife over anybody. But if there is something that I enjoy doing that my wife absolutely just hates, I can, and I really want to do it with somebody else, I can go do it with a guy. I can go to the baseball game with a guy, I can go whatever. And, and my wife she just likes doing stuff with me, and most things I like doing, she's fine with doing it with me. I'm trying to even think of something that she just would not want to do with me that I would really like to do, and I can't really think of that, But I'm sure there's something. But either way, if I need to do it with somebody else, I'll do it with a guy. So, and this is just kind of a bonus point too. When it comes to treating other women, I'm just going to address this just because there's probably some goofballs out there that need to hear it. But don't try to boss other women around. You are not their authority. Okay? And men, the only women you are in authority over is your wife and your daughters. And if you're not married, even though you're a man, you are not in authority over any woman. So don't try to boss them around. You can't do that. If some dude tried bossing my daughter around, I would completely support my daughter if she told him to go jump in a lake, because he has no authority over her. So, again, if you need a woman to have authority over, go get a wife. And what's really disturbing is when you have men, and this happens too, who are married and yet feel the need to tell other women what to do. I question your relationship. I think you have real problems in your marriage, and I feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for your wife that you feel the need to do that. I mean, I've known people too that they don't like certain things that my wife does. And it's like they feel like they need to have some kind of say, and, and can disregard what she does and have some kind of authority there. And it's like, dude, you have nothing. I'm okay with it. Therefore, it's 100% okay. And the fact that this even concerns you shows me a lot of trouble that you're probably having in your marriage. When you have your own family, when you have a wife, and when you have children, it is work, and sometimes it can even be challenging in areas, especially with kids, trying to keep them in subjection. But when you have a wife that actually is submitting, when you have children that are submitting, you get the fulfillment you need. You don't have authority, issues and complexes and things that are bothering you, and so you have no need to step out of bounds. But it's like, because a guy can't conquer his wife, it's like he's got to conquer somebody. And he's scared of his wife, so he's going to go find another woman somewhere that he can somehow boss around. So, again, anytime you see guys cross lines, start, trying to fix other people's wives, just understand that guy probably has a really bad relationship with his wife that would probably really have us crying for him if we knew how bad it was. So, another thing too, what about social media? Is it okay to be friends on social media with other women? Is it okay to follow other women on social media? And, somebody might say, no, I don't have any female friends on Facebook. I don't follow any women. I'm not going to be a follower of a woman. And, and hey, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. Okay. But at the same time too, I don't think it's wrong to have Facebook friends that are women, or to follow a woman on Twitter or something like that. It's not just because you're following somebody on social media, it doesn't mean they're like an authority over you. It's not like following somebody's leadership. It's just a term that we use for, I'm paying attention to what they do. I might follow a woman on Facebook because, maybe I'm friends, I like real life friends with her husband, and he's not on social media. And, I want to see the pictures they post of their family and what they do, because I care about them as people. There's a ton of reasons you can do it, and it's appropriate. But here's the thing, when it comes to social media, just keep everything public. Everything's public. Keep it in mind. Keep that in mind, that everything is public. When you understand things are public, it helps keep you in line. And so, there's a lot of good, appropriate reasons to be friends on social media, or even to follow women, now don't follow the woman that's being a hussy. If she's on there posting inappropriate pictures and things like that, by all means, unfollow, unfriend, block, whatever you have to do. But, at the same time, there's a lot of people in this world that I care about, that I like, and, I like their families. I care about their children, and, there's, women in our church that I'm friends with on social media, and they post things about their family, and, I like seeing that kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with me following that, paying attention to that. But understand too, everything I do on that, anytime I hit like, everyone can see that I liked it. And so, everybody can see. I don't know if I have my settings where everybody can see who I follow. I don't even think it's that big of a deal. But just, these are very public things, and that needs to be our mindset about it. And so, if there ever is any reason to communicate, keep things public. But even if it's something that's technically private, like through Facebook Messenger or something like that, I'm not saying, I get questions all the time. I have people that contact me through Messenger, through email, all the time that I don't know, that are females. And so, I often respond to those things. I'll answer questions, but I always, whatever communication I do, I always, in my mind, this is public. This person can share screenshots of everything that I'm saying. If a woman calls the church, like I said, I'll answer the phone. I will talk to them, but I also just have it in my head too, that they're probably recording the phone conversation. Okay. I used to hang out in the new IFB world. They record and screenshot everything because they're always suspicious of everyone and looking for someone to expose. And so, I've just come to the point, any communication I do it as if this is going to get shared on social media. Conversations that I have, I just have it in my head. If I'm talking on the phone to somebody, they're probably recording this and planning on sending it to YouTube. So I'm not going to say anything that I wouldn't want the whole world hearing. That's how I operate. And I think that's just how everyone should operate. And so again, I'm not saying you can't answer a question or something like that, but if I've just got a woman communicating with me all the time, there's going to come a point where I'm just going to, once you start getting creeped out, trust your instincts. Trust your wife's instincts. And there's been times before where my wife has said stuff like, this doesn't look right. This doesn't seem right. I don't like this. And, and I didn't think anything of it. But let me tell you, when I hear her say that kind of thing, I pay attention to it. And I think we ought to do that kind of thing. And so treat every communication as if it's public, but by all means, avoid private communication as much as possible. If you really do need to text a woman or communicate with a woman, you can do group texts, and I have people like that do that. If they're communicating with me or my wife, that's how they send the text, where it goes to her and it goes to me. And you can do that on things like Messenger, just to kind of have that accountability. Use those things. These are very easy things that you can do, and it's all about protecting yourself. And that's very important, especially in this day and age that we're living in. So, the last thing, we're ultimately what this is all about too. We are trying to avoid temptation. We are trying to flee youthful lusts. We're trying to abstain from all appearance of evil. And especially for me as a pastor, because there's been a lot of pastors that have fallen, and it's devastating to the church when that happens. I don't want anyone to even get the wrong idea when it comes to these things. We live in a world where inappropriate relationships take place all the time. We also live in a world where inappropriate relationships a lot of times are considered okay. But folks, it's not. Some things are not okay. And so, I'm going to protect myself. The Bible says in Proverbs 5:15, drink waters out of thine own cistern and running waters out of thine own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad, and rivers of water in the streets. Let them be only thine own, and not a stranger's with thee. Let thy fountains be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of thy youth. Let her be as a loving hind and pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love. And why wilt thou, my son, be ravished with a strange woman, and embrace the bosom of a stranger? We all have certain needs. We all have certain desires. God designed the role of a wife to fulfill those things. Whatever it is you feel like you have this need for, never look for it anywhere outside your wife. And if you don't have a wife, seek for a wife. And he that findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor of the Lord. And I like that. Drink water out of thine own cisterns. Okay? If I need something to eat, I should go to my refrigerator. I shouldn't go to your refrigerator. I need food. Go to your own refrigerator. Okay? And we all have needs, but there's only certain places we should go to get them. And when we mess up, the Bible says in Proverbs 6:32, but whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. A wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. For jealousy is the rage of man, therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content though thou givest many gifts. The results of adultery are too devastating. I do not even want to take a chance when it comes to that. So, I'm going to protect myself. I don't even want to be accused. Now, I understand. We live in a world where false accusations happen all the time. But at the same time, there's some things that we might not even be able to avoid. But you know what? If I can avoid those things, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. When that young lady came to the church, I was not going to be tempted to do anything. But at the same time, too, I don't even want to deal with, rumors going out there. I've got enough junk out there, people lying about me on social media where it's real super obvious. But there's just some things, that we can't help, but there are things that we can help. One of the things we've done, I've got a window that we had added in on my office door. We did that in the offices here at the church. Why are you doing that? For accountability. I want it to be as obvious as possible. Things are in the open. If I'm here at the church by myself, women aren't supposed to come here. We had a lady one time that got really mad because, she just decided she was going to do some cleaning project at the church and was like showing up at the church when I was there. And I had to call her husband, and I told him, I said, listen, I'm glad she's wanting to do this at the church, but she needs to do this sometime when I'm not around. Or, and I said, we can, figure that out. But I said, I can't be here alone with your wife. He was real understanding, but she got mad about it. It's just like, why do you feel the need to be here by yourself when I'm here? And I don't know if she got insulted, like I thought she was a hussy or something. I didn't think that, but I don't want anyone to even be suspicious. I don't want people driving by the church and noticing my car and this other person's car, and just, having questions. It's not worth the trouble. And again, sometimes things just happen that you can't help, but most stuff could be avoided. Most situations where pastors have committed adultery, where they've done really bad things, they were in situations they shouldn't have been in. And a lot of these stories that I hear about pastors messing up, one thing they all had the habit of doing, counseling women alone in their office. I do not understand why every pastor does not have that rule. I will not counsel a woman alone in my office. That should just be a no-brainer. But I don't know if they just think, I would never do that. I don't know. And then later they just get tempted. I don't even want to find myself in that situation. Even when it comes to, I'm the same way, even when it comes to finances here at the church. I do not think I would ever steal the church money, do anything unethical with the church money. I don't think I would ever do anything like that. But you know what? I don't even want the temptation. So we have certain rules and guidelines and checks and balances that we've put in. And if we don't do one or two of those things, we've not committed some sin. But at the same time, you know what? I'm not just going to do the bare minimum on these things. I'm going to remove temptation. And so if I ever get myself in a financial pinch, you know, I'm not even going to be tempted because we've got too many checks and balances in place. I won't get away with it. And that's my attitude when it comes to anything. I'm not going to get away with it. Okay. People don't get away with stuff. You know, pastors who commit adultery and are perverts and stuff, they never get away with it. They always eventually get busted. They always do. Guys who do financial fraud, they always get busted. It always comes out. So just remove the temptation. These things are too important. And if you have, if you're just demanding, you know, the right to hug, touch, you know, communicate, be alone with other women, that just tells me you have a need that needs to be met. And that's normal. So just get a wife. That's where those needs are met. And that's what he's talking about in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So I hope you will practice these things. I hope you will do these things. I'm tired of hearing stories about guys messing up, and then you find out that, you know, it said it didn't just happen. You are not just going to get up one day and just boom, all of a sudden be in the situation where you just fall into adultery. Never happens that way. It's usually, especially with good Christians, it's a process that took months. It was weeks and months of just questionable things, crossing lines before it finally got to that point. And so people might think, you're over the top, you're obsessive, you're so picky about these things. Well, you know what? I've also been married for 23, 22 years almost, and we haven't had any problems in this area. And it's worked great for us, and we're going to keep it going. These rules that I follow, it's the same kind of rules that my dad had, who's been married for 43 years, and it's gone great. I come from a long line of people who succeeded in marriage and made it till death did them part. And they didn't just succeed in staying married, but they actually were married and happy. And that's a great accomplishment. And you know what? They practiced these things. And, you know, in our world that we live in today, of everybody just trying to do the bare minimum of everything, they're not too successful. So, you know, pardon me when I do not follow their lead. I think these are very good principles that every man ought to have. Watch out when you see yourself getting tempted by these things, flattered. Put safeguards in place. I promise you, it's not worth it. It is not worth it. So I hope this was a help. I appreciate y'all watching. We'll see you all next week.